Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. There is no way I would run for president. I probably wouldn't even get my family's vote. And not to mention, who the hell would want to spend non-stop for the rest of my life pressing the fat cat flesh, special interest flesh. But it's fun for me to imagine I were running for president. These would be the planks of my platform. First would be a real non-stop assault on cancer. I've had the privilege of facilitating groups of scientists, and it's amazing how in a mere 1 hour, and these are scientists from all over the world, we can make huge progress on the issues that they're dealing with. I would convene series of these small groups tackling every little aspect of cancer. There's so many cancers and there's so many approaches to it, but I would make that priority. What I call New Israel. It is crazy that the United Nations put that sliver of desert to make that the Jewish homeland after the Holocaust. That's surrounded by millennia-long sworn enemies of an extraordinarily different culture. The Israeli culture is a very can-do, technocentric, very liberal, and surrounded by people, let's just say, very different. All the surrounding huge countries. More arms is not going to solve. And whatever temporary truce is not going to hold. Better, we should have New Israel, in which all Israelis can stay, of course, as long as they want in Israel, but have the option to relocate, and if they need financial help, fine, to what is the equivalent of an Indian reservation just north of New York City. It's massive forest land north of New York City. New York City home to 3 times as many Jews as Jerusalem. That would be New Israel. They would be far less likely to suffer endless threats to their lives. We as the U.S. taxpayer would save a fortune, and that's New Israel. If I were president, I would promulgate that. Merit. We have become a society in which merit has become a dirty word in many quarters. That's crazy. Because every dollar we spend on the more meritorious, the person more likely to contribute to society, the organization more likely to contribute to a better society for us all, is more wisely spent than that dollar redistributed to an individual or groups that have heretofore produced, let's say, far less of benefit to society. Merit would be number one. This reverse discrimination, anti-merit is a formula for societal dissolution, and as president, I would not allow that. Some of that is spawned by the victimization mindset that our society's mind mold, schools, colleges, media, churches, therapists, counselors have perpetrated. It's much easier to blame your failures on racism, sexism, your parents, what your spouse did to you, capitalism. Those may or may not be factors. We'll leave that to another day. But certainly it's disempowering. We certainly retain some measure of agency over our futures. Now we so venerate victimhood that people are demanding, groups are demanding reparations when they've already received trillions, literally, of, quote, reparates compensatory programs, and yet the achievement gap in achievement, crime, drugs are as wide as ever. That takes a toll, huge toll, not just on the taxpayer, wasted money, but on the victims of that crime, drug abuse, poor performance in schools that decimate the education for all of us. No victimization. I would have one of my major initiatives as president would be anti-victimization. For a little small example, we tend to say, oh, it's Facebook's fault that teenage girls are very upset. Should we Facebook is merely a vehicle. Should we abandon the pen? Facebook enables millions of us to share all kinds of useful and fun information. And demanding all of this, placing all this blame on Facebook rather than the individuals is wrong. Defense. We retain a largely battleship-centric defense. the, quote, military-industrial complex, with tons of not just battleships, but fighter jets, carrier jets, bases all over the world, in a world when much of the wars are going to be done either at the very local level, guerrilla warfare, or tech-centric, whether it be cyber terrorism, bioterrorism. So this is an area I would cut probably 50% of the budget, replacing all of that big hardware and bases with really smart, tech-centric, sometimes AI-centric defense. Like, for example, having smart sensors all over to see who might be about to detonate a suitcase nuke or release a biovirus. It won't be perfect, but machine learning, they will keep learning from the wrong decisions, from the right decisions. That's where I put my money in defense, and that would leave a huge amount of savings and greater security, and that savings should and could go back to the taxpayer. Nobody ever talks about returning money to the taxpayer. I do. I would eliminate the space program. It's very awe-inspiring to think that we could walk on Mars or whatever, but the cost is crazy. And so we develop small practical items, whether it be Tang or the aluminum blanket, not worth the money. Not for our money, our taxpayer money. We must treat our dollar, our government dollars, as though it was our own, because it is our own. Immigration. I would build a smart fence. Again, AI and machine learning driven, and I would not allow it to occur at government speed. Government always says it takes months, it'll take years, bureaucratic red tape. I remember here in the San Francisco Bay Area when we had an earthquake and the Bay Bridge, the leading connector into San Francisco, was decimated. And the government said it's going to take us months to fix it. Well, some entrepreneurial contractor got up and said, I'll do it in 3 days. And he did. No more things done at government speed. They must be done at private sector speed for all of our benefit. In addition to the smart wall, I would not be one of those extremists who would deport everybody. I am aware of human beings and their families, and I hate that they choose to violate our laws and very often got false ID. But I think the greater net good does not accrue to deporting them. I would instead require face recognition ID, which would indeed come into the computer, and if they are illegal, they would have to pay a fine or community service. They would not be deported. That strikes to me the balance between justice for the millions who have immigrated here legally and some humanity, some humaneness to the illegal immigrants. The job interview is notoriously invalid, and that takes a huge toll on the quality of every product and service we use. One of my federal initiatives would be machine learning-based predictive job interviews. Far more valid, and it would be for each of the major job categories. And again, machine learning would keep improving it based on if the prediction turned out to be that this was going to be a great employee and he turned out to be great, wonderful. If he turned out to be bad, the machine learning would adjust its model. It's also going to be less racist. It's clearly tied to the requirements of the job. So I would prioritize machine learning-based predictive job interview. And I think that could be done either by simply encouraging the private sector, either just encouraging it, or incentives. I'd reluctantly make it a government program, but if necessary, I would. We're all worried about loss of jobs, for good reason. The only permanent solution to loss of jobs is entrepreneurship. That creates new needs that people will have. I would create an entrepreneurship army. It sickens me that our schools and our colleges treat entrepreneurship as almost the Antichrist. They do not teach it, but they teach you how to hold a placard and protest. Far better to learn how to be an ethical entrepreneur. And I would start with kindergarten with the lemonade stands. But the businesses got ever more complicated as they go through the high schools and colleges. Talk about a required course. That would be my number one required course, ethical entrepreneurship. Education. I would make tenure illegal. There are some teachers who are great for year 1 or 2, but when you have tenure for life. And I've seen burned out teachers after year 3, 5, or 10 who year after year bore or devastate children. And it's almost impossible for the principal to get rid of them, or a university to get rid of a burned out professor. Or who's not even burned out, who's stale, who's behind the times. I would issue an executive order to make tenure illegal, and I would fight the teachers union who insists on that absolutely anti-child, anti-learning tenure. I would eliminate the U.S. Department of Education, state departments of education, county offices of education, leaving only a small district office for each district to handle payroll and the thereby smaller number of regulations. That would yield massive savings, which would go directly to the schools and or the individual teachers. That would increase learning by a lot and save the taxpayer money. Super courses. It's simply true that teachers range from terrific to terrible. And kids all over the country are subject to that full range. But there are some rare number of teachers who are transformational, inspiring, intelligent, clear, funny. I would require super courses, at least at the high school level, where one of the world's best teachers teaches online using simulations, demonstrations that are impossible to create locally, but can be done nationally. Gamified, for example. Totally individualized, translatable into any language. And again, I would fight the damn teachers union who would fight this kind of thing, because it would cost teacher jobs. Yes, it would, and it should. Because our priority should not be teacher jobs, it should be children's learning. Our children, our future. Higher ed. Higher ed laughs at us. The government continues to pass more financial aid, which all that does is it enables the colleges to go, goody, oh good, now we're getting more money from the taxpayer. We can raise our prices. It's a fool's game. No more subsidizing college, especially because it's an inferior product. The famous study, Academically Adrift, found that 36% of students gained 0 from freshman to senior in those critical areas of critical thinking and writing. And I would offer a degree from what I'd create, something called United States University, where people could take courses from wherever they wanted, and we would simply be a record keeper. And if you took enough courses to constitute a degree, associates or bachelors, you would get a degree from United States University. That would save a fortune. Cars. Foolishly, our green government is forcing us out of our cars. Huge amounts of green cost, the cost of a new car, greatly increased car registration fees, tolls, more lanes converted to toll lanes, which they misleadingly call express lanes. They use marketing consultants like crazy. Despite the increase in population, reducing the number of lanes and roads rather than increasing it to match population, which makes people's blood pressure go up as they're driving and stealing precious time that they don't have. And replacing car lanes with bike lanes that already were sitting empty, or, absurdly, clumps of shrubs with a bench that nobody uses. Roundabouts that actually causes it. I see people being closer to accidents in these roundabouts, which cost a fortune to create. Bad use of taxpayer money. They say mass transit, but mass transit is irretrievably doomed to failure. It's wildly expensive to build. It's noisy. sometimes dangerous, and rarely gets you close enough to where you need to go. And if it's snowing and raining or whatever, you've got to walk the rest of the way or find an Uber or whatever. I would rather, as a federal government, instead of these boondoggle green initiatives, like I've seen a trolley in Napa that goes back and forth from downtown to outskirts, empty, always empty. I'd rather invest in a flying car, vertical takeoff, where from any parking spot or driveway, you can take off. That creates an infinite number of lanes, and of course, cameras and other kind of security will make them safer than cars. That's something that the government should subsidize, or at least, instead of the FAA having endless rules to make it difficult to advance the vertical takeoff flying car, I would really carefully look at what regulations really are needed. Income tax is a bugaboo for everybody. It takes a week of my life every week. The record keeping. And it's unfair to the average Joe because successful people and corporations can hire accountants to reduce their taxes. Rather, I would replace income taxes with an equivalent dollar amount in sales tax increase. So if we have a 9% sales tax, we might make it 20 to keep it revenue neutral. But that way it's fairer. You're taxing people on what they actually spend on. And it's much more cheat-proof. You'd replace income tax with sales tax. The public would save so much time. I would reinvent the political system. Our current system ensures that the best candidates do not run, let alone win. You've got to be willing to campaign nonstop and press flesh you wish you didn't have to press. So that only the most ambitious, but not necessarily statesmanlike, are willing to endure a lifetime of that. So I would take a lesson from stock index funds. I call it select, don't elect. Legislatures at the local, state, and federal level would be created using passive criteria like Teacher of the Year, Cop of the Year, Most Cited Philosopher, Most Cited Scientist, and people at random to ensure ideological diversity. They would vote for their CEO, their mayor, their governor, their president. Nothing is perfect, but that would yield a far better leadership than our currently corruption-prone system. Men. Men now for decades have been treated unfairly relative to their merit. If a Martian descended onto Earth and watched TV or read books or listened to podcasts or whatever, mostly men, especially white men, are portrayed as oafs, boors, or sleazes. Yet men do so much. Sure, some small percentage of men start war, although women have started wars too. But men have created the iPhone, antibiotics, the internet, the webcam into which I'm talking. Even men have invented the disposable tampon, the birth control pill. They do most of the dangerous jobs, from sewer worker to roofer, pest control worker. We should treat men fairly, and yet, when women have a deficit, for example, underrepresentation in STEM, there have been billions of dollars of redress. But when men have the deficit, the ultimate deficit, we live 6 years shorter, and our last decade in worse health, there are 4.4 widows for every widower. 95% of all the gender-specific research as a result of, I learned from a PubMed review of the literature, which indexes all the medical journals, found that 95+% of gender-specific research has been on women. Outreach? When did the last time you saw an event for early heart attack, which kills many, many more men than breast cancer kills women? And yet we endlessly see a sea of pink ribbons. The intelligence pill. We all know that we are part genetic, part environment. But just as we know that no Volkswagen Bug could ever beat a Porsche, no matter how well you tune it up, we must give people, especially those of the multi-generational poor, an option to indeed start on a level playing field. We should fund research to identify what I'm metaphorically calling an intelligence pill that would, of course, be completely voluntary and paid for the poor like Medi-Cal does already, so that people have the option to try to ensure that their child starts life without one arm tied behind his or her back. More conventional, I am pro-choice. I find it absurd to use the term pro-life that some little fertilized egg has anywhere near the same rights as a woman to choose if and when she wants a baby. I am absolutely pro-choice, and I would do everything I could to ensure that women's right to choose. I am pro-gay marriage. I believe that being gay is largely genetic, and there's nothing wrong with being gay. So, and they should be given the rights of marriage. Now, I'm not a huge fan of pride. I understand the rationale. It makes people feel uncomfortable with who they are. But I think that the negative effects of pride are bad. It's more divisive. It celebrates who you're sleeping with and flamboyance. Most of those pride events are... I'm much more a believer in restraint. Okay. This is probably my most liberal view. I'm in favor of single-payer health care. Insurers are too hell-bent, including Medicare, but also the private insurers, are too hell-bent on denying and cost control, often at patients' liability. And doctors are going nuts trying to deal with the paperwork and the denials. We need to get rid of the bureaucracy. We need to have a smarter single-payer health care. I am well aware of how bad it is in Canada and England. Enormous waste, even for important procedures. But we must learn lessons from that. And instead of continuing to subsidize the middlemen, the insurance industry, Medicare, we need to develop the world's best single-payer health care. Ukraine? I don't like any of them. Zelensky is an actor, and he's really good at pitching for money. But if you really look at the Ukrainian people, if we support them, a group that has not exactly been the greatest contributor to society, don't we have to support everybody? And should America be the world's policeman? Now, I'm aware there's a chance that Putin, who I don't trust either, is going to try to take over the world. My gut says no. My gut says he wants to retain or regain certain land. So while I wouldn't trust him at all, rather than give more billions of dollars thanks to Zelensky's pitches, I would have my most intelligent people talk with Putin and his lieutenants, try to really understand what's going on if I could, and then make my policies appropriately. Media bias. It has dispirited me that the media exerts such bias now. With the exceptions of Free Press and C-SPAN, Intelligence Squared, most media outlets are frighteningly biased. leftist bias. They will censor any thought that disagrees. They will treat liberals completely different than they treat conservatives, even though in truth, all wisdom does not reside left of center. You see, I have a number of leftist views, but not all. We are truncating at the middle, and they will cancel you. They will tar you. They will never hire you. So as president, I would convene top editors from CNN to Fox, New York Times to Wall Street Journal, The New Yorker to Reason Magazine. And I would see if we could work out something that is cosmically just without being coercive. Libraries. Libraries still have tons of stacks that sit largely unused, all huge real estate at taxpayer expense. We must repurpose libraries. They must be community centers, not open bankers' hours from 10 to 5:30 as the libraries here in Oakland are, but from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., where there's tutoring, a cafe, entertainment in the evening. I'd repurpose libraries. And finally, the right to die. We don't question a dog owner's right to put his or her dog down when the pain is or cost is not worth it. Should we not give people the right to die? To die with dignity instead of in agony, as too often is the case, and at great cost? I would have universal right to die so that an individual can make that most intimate of decisions. And if non-compos mentis, of course, then the family members can. But I wouldn't require 2 doctors or 6 months left. I would give freedom to people to choose when to die. And I want to end this by sharing the piece of information that has most helped my friends, my clients, and myself. My father was a Holocaust survivor, and I asked him why he so rarely talked about the Holocaust. And he stiffened, which he rarely did. And he said, "Martin, the Nazis took 5 years from my life. I won't give them 1 minute more." He said, "Martin, stop looking back. Always take the next step forward." And in this land of victimization and forced redistribution, I believe America could be much better if we replaced the victimization with my father's advice. Stop looking back. Take the next step forward. I'm Marty Nemko. I do thank you for watching. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. And certainly would welcome you taking a look at any of my 34 books. Probably the one most relevant to this is What's the Big Idea? 39 Reinventions for a Better America. But all 34 books are on Amazon. Just go there, search on my name, Marty Nemko, Nemko, and you will find more than you can stomach. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.